Cool.
Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers before publishing everywhere to your podcast platform of choice. Thank you to my founding members and paid subscribers for supporting the production of this independent journalism directly. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Montell. Why don't you say hi, Brandon, and tell us where you're tuned in from today?
Hello. I'm here from San Francisco.
And what project are you working on?
I am working on a silly music game called Sock Puppet Superstar, where you control a singing sock puppet with your hand or two singing sock puppets with your two hands and try to sing as accurately as possible. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That sounds like a mashup of genres that I've never heard of before. Why don't you tell me how you came up with this idea?
So I originally had this idea a while ago when the Apple Vision Pro first came out, and that headset has such good hand tracking. And I was like, oh, I wonder what I could do with hand tracking and what's something you can do with your hands. And then I just found myself making a sock puppet shape with my hand. And I love music games and rhythm games. And so I was like, oh, it'd be fun to just make something sing. I didn't make it at that time. And then fast forward till last summer, and I hadn't thought about that idea in a while. And then there was completely different, bigger, more ambitious VR music game idea that I became obsessed with for like a month. And then I realized it was going to be like a whole big thing, and I haven't made a full game by myself before. So I'm like, let me try a smaller game. Yeah, there's that like singing sock puppet idea. So then I went back to it as sort of like a smaller scale VR music game idea that I felt like I could do more quickly. And that also would probably be easier to like, market in the sense that you could just describe it with a single sentence, which is kind of nice. And even though it's a mashup of genres, it does fall nicely within certain paradigms that already exist. So I feel like it was kind of immediately understandable. Okay, I know what this game is, and I just need to actually kind of execute it. So that's kind of how, since last summer, I've basically been obsessively working on this in my free time.
What does a workday look like to you working on this?
Anytime I sort of do something that makes myself chuckle a little bit, I am just like, okay, that has to go in the game. And so, like, a completely ridiculous example of this that was a little bit unexpected. And this was not a planned feature of the game until it started blowing up on the internet a little bit. Which I don't know if you've seen these videos where the lyrics change to pee pee poo poo, which is like so immature. It's like the voice synth that I have in the game originally could only do vowel sounds, and then I'm like, okay, let me try to like figure out how to get some consonants in there. And I started with a P sound, and then I was just sitting on the couch with my wife, like, and I started playing pee pee poo poo on this thing, and I was like, "That's funny. Okay, let me just throw a little video on there of how it's funny if the sock sings that." And then the internet chuckled at that too, and then insisted upon it being a feature in the game. So now I think that'll probably end up being a feature in the game that you can like change the lyrics if you want to stuff like that. But yeah, but also just like smaller things on the animation of the character and stuff. It is a lot of like following what's funny. The longest stretch of time is probably on just getting the character design right, which was so there's long stretches where it's not funny because it's just broken. But yeah, it is fun to just like have this chance to sort of like, oh, something's funny, just keep doing that.
How did you first hear about virtual reality, or what were your first interactions with it?
Yeah, so my first interaction with virtual reality was when I was a senior in college in 2015. There was early Oculus dev kit sort of thing set up at a career fair. Like maybe Oculus was visiting my college campus or something, and I tried it and thought it was awesome. And I don't even remember what that experience was, that I was it was probably something where, you were standing on a ledge, looking down or something like that. Um, that was my first interaction with it, but then I didn't really interact with it for a few years after that. Then later, my first job out of college was I was a software engineer at Google, and went through a few different teams, and then at one point ended up on the team that originally made Tilt Brush, and I was doing some sort of non VR stuff on that team, more phone based AR prototypes. But it was super fun being there with that team doing VR stuff, and I would try out, the stuff they were working on for Tilt Brush and other other VR stuff going on at Google. So that was my first like in-depth interaction to VR, where they also like the company let me have a VR, like a Vive that I could set up at my own house and stuff. Even though I wasn't working on VR, I was kind of like on the team ish. So they let me set that up.
And then what was your favorite experience in VR? If you had to think of a single moment of presence where you just felt there, what would it be?
One early experience that really sticks out for me was Google Earth VR. The first team I worked on at Google was actually Google Earth, not the VR one, but the regular Google Earth. And what was really fun about that was just like flying around the Earth and just discovering these different parts of the planet and stuff. And when I tried Google Earth VR, there was this one moment that really sticks out for me where, at first you're like flying around at human scale or like maybe a bit bigger than human scale. And there was this one feature where you could kind of tilt the world. So now rather than having this huge globe underneath you, you have this huge globe in front of you, kind of like you're looking out the bottom of the space station or something. And there that perspective change. I don't know, just that one moment really stuck with me. That where it was like sudden. I hadn't experienced, even though I'd stared at the globe so many times at my job while working on Google Earth. I just never seen that perspective of the Earth before, and it was like for a moment I actually felt like an astronaut, which is pretty sick. So anyway, that's maybe one moment that sticks out early on.
I love it. I love that. That's a good call out. I don't want to, I've heard it too much in this space to mention the overview effect, but it's the idea that
Yeah.
astronauts, when they get out there in space, they get this overview feeling of seeing how small the Earth is in the grand scheme of the universe. And they get this new perspective on humanity and, why can't we all just get along type thing
Yeah.
hitting them hard because they've got this picture of just how small this blue marble is in the grand scheme of things. But you're pretty much describing that you're not the only one to have had that experience of just the awe of it. I've also mentioned Titans of Space has come up a lot. I just included that in the Good Virtuality collection, where
Mhm.
it's within 30 seconds of entering that experience, you've got the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun all represented at 1 millionth scale. And so you've
Okay.
got the moon orbiting around the Earth, and you've got kind of the same view of the Earth that you just described, where it's sort of below you from that same angle. But then the moon is orbiting around it, not at the right distance, but at the right scale in comparison to the Earth. And you can see how small the moon is in comparison to the Earth, this little, I don't know, beach ball sized thing floating around it. And then you turn to the
Mhm.
right, and then you see the sun, and you see that the sun is just extraordinarily bigger than anything your brain can really comprehend. And
Yeah.
you can't have that experience with any other medium. You can't grasp scale in that way with a
Totally.
book. Yeah. The sun represented off to the right side of the page with like a little slice off of it to give you an idea of just how big the sun is in comparison to all the other planets and bodies of the solar system. But there's just simply no way to represent in a book or 2D medium that the sun
Mhm.
is that much bigger. And when you use a medium like VR that presents scale the way it does, you're just using your innate sense of how your brain grasps scale to convey this thing that other mediums could not convey very well. And so
Mhm.
yeah, Google Earth did that too. And great call out there on an incredible experience that many have had. All right. So coming back to your inspirations and sort of following this line of humor, how do you decide that like you want to keep putting time into this? The idea that you're sitting there next to your partner on the couch and making pee pee poo poo sounds coming out of your headset. Is your partner laughing at this too? Are they shaking their head? How do you decide to focus on this?
Especially when she laughs at it, then I know I have to keep doing, with that particular thing because she hears too much probably of this game. The very first prototype I did of the game was, yeah, I was just like, let me try to do the fastest possible thing I can do, right? To see if what this actually feels like. And so in a day or two, I was like, okay, let me just get some primitive shapes in there with a jaw and an upper face and two circles to represent the head, and then like another two capsules to represent the neck and body of this sock. So just primitive shapes. And I started with hand tracking and just make it so some simple script to make the mouth go up and down. I did one sample of my voice, one recording of my voice that was pitched up and down based on the height of the thing, which is still what the control scheme is. And it was already funny just as those primitive shapes. That kind of convinced me enough to keep going. Like, just the fact that it was kind of immediately validated to me that it was funny in a primitive form, that's kind of why, maybe I stuck with it for the first couple months. Yeah.
What do you think the role is of hand tracking in this project? Is it better with hand tracking?
It's a good question. For the first while of developing it, I was only using hand tracking because that's how I was thinking of this game. Then I was like, oh, well, if someone wants to try it on some other headset without hand tracking, just use controllers. Then I added controller support. And my personal preference right now is actually using the controllers just because it's a little bit more ergonomic to just be holding a controller and pressing a button. But I don't know, but it's also fun. It's also fun with hand tracking. I think hand tracking
Interesting.
was definitely the origin of this idea, but it works on both, honestly.
That's very interesting, and I get it. It makes sense that you're kind of, like, in between, and it's not a you're still in active development, so it's really hard to give a clear answer to that. Why did you start building something during this period of VR's history? I mean, you were working on this last summer, you said, which is kind of like a lull in the market. That's the beginning of the lull in the market that kind of hit this space where it's still been a couple years here since Meta has released a headset. The sort of rumors or hints now are that the next headset from Meta is probably going to be priced in a different pricing category or than these $300 to $600 devices. I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but it's kind of madness now that after a couple of years here without a new headset from Meta, the headsets are actually more expensive this year in 2026 than they were the last couple of years. So there's a lot of headwinds pushing at the VR market. And you worked with VR teams back last decade. So I want to understand, why did you sort of feel this was the time to start messing around with a project in VR?
Started as sort of a hobby project. So it was not a business market driven decision to start working on it. And if it had been, I probably wouldn't have started working on it for all the reasons you just said. But it was sort of just starting as this passion project like I said, this other idea that involved kind of like using different physical otherworldly ways to make music. That was sort of the like general idea behind the other game that I started tinkering with, and I just kind of felt really passionate about learning to make music in different ways in 3D space. And yeah, I at that time I was not thinking, oh, this will be sort of a thing that becomes my full-time job or anything like that. So it was purely just a passion thing. And then when I switched to the sock puppet project, that also was, well, part of it was, if I sell this thing, it will be easier it's a really marketable kind of premise. But more than that, at the time, it was like, okay, let me like get a little bit of experience under my belt making something smaller and like still have some transferable skills if I want to go back to that other idea. And it seems like a really fun thing anyway. So I was sort of following the fun. And I feel like even though there might be some market headwinds because of everything you just described, I feel like it's no less fun to do stuff in VR and to tinker with it.
What a beautiful answer. And you're speaking to kind of why I'm still dedicated to this technology despite all of those things. When I talk to professionals in this space, they're like, isn't VR kind of on the way out? And I'm like, it's never going to go on the way out for exactly what you just said. It's still enormously fun, and it never will not be enormously fun to immerse yourself in another space and experience it and scale and all those things. Embodiment is just incredible. And I have a quote on my website from one of the founders of Oculus, and he went off and started a company called Framework. And Framework does laptops today, Linux-based laptops that have interchangeable parts, just like a desktop does. So it's a really cool idea, Linux-based operating system, and you've got a, a whole catalog of parts that you can get and swap them out. And I was asking them about VR and about their departure from Oculus back during the early days. Like they were out by like, I don't know, 2018 or 2019. They were sort of done with Facebook and Meta and went off to start off their own thing here. And the comment was something to the effect of uh, the reason for people to use VR uh, as their main computing device is still unknown, and we're this many years into it. And I don't know, being silly, it has potentially a top 3 use of this medium to me, like just getting in VR and being weird.
Mhm.
And nothing's more weird than sock puppets that sing in really weird pitches. All right, so walk me through the first day that you went viral with these videos. Like just, I want to hear sort of beginning to end. You're making the video. What are you doing in the video? How do you post the video? When do you find out it's doing well? That whole process.
Maybe this was February. GDC was coming up, the Game Developers Conference, and so I thought, okay, before GDC, let me post a little bit of content out there, maybe get a Steam coming soon page up so that if I meet someone there, I can point them to this. And so I was like, okay, let me just start dipping my toes in posting something. And I truly was expecting to go viral. Maybe the fourth video I posted was the first one that went viral. There was this trend that people were doing on TikTok where they were singing a particular harmony to Wide Awake by Katy Perry. Seemingly everyone who was a singing TikToker was doing this harmony. So I'm like, okay, it'll be funny if this Hawk did this trending harmony. So I and so it really just takes a few minutes for me to make a quick level basically in the game where I have to maybe play out the melody on a keyboard and write down the lyrics and a phonetic transcription of the lyrics. But if only a 15-second thing, it only takes a few to do. So over the course of maybe an hour, I charted out these 15 seconds of the harmony and recorded the thing and posted it. And then I could tell that the algorithm liked this one more than my other ones. And it started going a little bit nuts. And by the time it was I was pumped by the time there were 4,000 views on this thing. I'm like, this is exceeding my expectations by a lot. I'm like, this is so cool. But a day or two later, it was at almost 1 million views or something on TikTok. At that time, I didn't have social media outside of this. So it was definitely overwhelming and my nervous system was like on fire because I like have never had this many eyeballs. It was like suddenly this thing that's just something I've looked at and maybe two other people have looked at in this world. Suddenly, like I live in San Francisco. The population of San Francisco is 800,000 people. So I'm like more than the entire population of San Francisco is suddenly looking at this thing that only 3 people have looked at so far. So it was a bit crazy.
And it's
Uh,
not you, it's your sock puppets are famous. That's even more
it,
hysterical, right? Like, you're going outside worried that everyone's looking at you, but they can't be looking at you. They're thinking about your sock puppets, right?
Yes, exactly. I'm a little part of the screen, but they're staring at the sock puppet. Yeah, yeah, it's a bit nuts.
So, what is the most viral video you've done at this point? So that was just the beginning of you, like, chasing the drug of social media stardom. You've had a couple ones go viral at this point right now?
Yeah, so right. After I posted that first one that went crazy, I didn't have a Steam page up at that time. So I was like, "Oh no, I gotta capture wish lists and stuff." So I let alone a MetaQuest page at that time. So I hustled and got a Steam coming soon page as quick as I could, and I'm like, "Okay, please let that not just be a fluke. Let me see if I can find another singing trend or post that same song again with a different voice or something." Unfortunately, um it wasn't just a one-off. So there have been quite a few other videos that perform similarly because I've learned so much about the algorithm. I feel like in these last few weeks about how like, within the first 3 seconds, that's when people scroll away. So as long as, you have text on the screen and people's eyeballs stay on this thing for a few seconds, then I don't know. So it's just learning about like what are the important features of these videos that like make people watch it. The one that's gone the most viral so far was the first one where I was showing duets off, where you can have two hands or two controllers going on at the same time. And so this will sort of be a feature in the game where every song will have a solo mode where you just use a single hand to control a single puppet, and then a duet mode where you have two hands and they're singing in harmony or they're trading off who's singing. So I did Ave Maria in a duet harmony situation, and that's the one that's been the biggest video so far.
Awesome. So tell me about going to GDC and meeting Creature, because I understand you're sort of involved with them now. Tell me about that process.
I went to GDC. Doug is the head of Creature, the label that I'm now working with, and I just met him at GDC after he had given a talk, and we were chatting a little bit, and I showed him a clip of my game and stuff, and then and I knew of Creature already because I used to work with Ash Pinnock, who was a co-director on Creature's game Starship Home. We were both working together at Google a long time ago, and so met Doug at GDC, and then we chatted a few times since then. And sent him a build of the game, and they liked it. And as sort of a solo developer who's having to do everything myself, it was pretty exciting to have this opportunity where there could be a team behind me who's like helping out on the back end of stuff. So yeah, I think it's exciting to get to work with them.
Between now and launch, what do you expect to happen and how long do you expect that to take?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly how long it should take, but I want it to be as quick as possible so that I can ship an MVP. But my hope would be a couple things. Well, first of all, I just actually soft launched on my social media the fact that it's actually a fun flat game too. So basically, my hope is to do simultaneously be able to launch it on VR and just a PC game where you're using your mouse, and as well as, yeah, the VR with either controllers and hand tracking. So that's sort of the idea for releasing it. And then a big question to figure out is the content of the game. Because so far, my plan has been to use public domain songs, of which there's actually a lot of public domain songs that would be really fun to sing. And I've got a whole list, and also some friends of mine who are composers are working on making covers for the backing tracks of some public domain songs that would be in the game. But who knows? I would love to be able to license some pop songs so that people can make their sock puppets sing songs they're familiar with. And I'd also would definitely am planning to have custom song support. It might having an actual full-fledged song editor is probably later down the line. We'll see. But definitely having some way to import your own, MIDI and lyrics and stuff like that so you can make the sock puppet do whatever you want. That's sort of the like current plan for the game. And yeah, I don't have a timeline that I'm like ready to commit to now, but yeah, want to working hard to do it as fast as I can.
Tell me about your education and your sort of inspirations. What inspires you?
Yeah, so my education, well, I went to college for computer science, but was always focused on the graphics side of things. And I mean, in a lot of ways, this project is the fusion of like three of my interests because I've always loved coding, and that's why I majored in computer science. I also love graphics and animation. So right now I work at an animation studio, and I also have at times been a hobbyist, like actual animator, like animating characters, which is not my job, but something I love to do. I've always been a hobbyist musician. So like as a kid, I collected instruments and would try to learn new instruments and stuff. In a lot of ways, a VR animated music game is kind of the fusion of those three things of like being able to code it, do the art and animation, and figure out the music side of things. I think all of those things are definitely coalescing in this project.
That's awesome. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly the cross section of everything you've worked on. I think we're getting near the end of the podcast here. What were your first memories of interacting with computers, and how did you get into sort of video games or computers in the first place?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of video games, I mean, we definitely had a personal computer at home when I was growing up, but my first console was a PS2. And I was actually just remembering the other day about this. I used to play this American Idol video game on PS2. I had forgotten about this till like a few days ago. And it was so funny because it's similar in a lot of ways to the game I'm making, because it was a rhythm game where you just pressed X, square, circle, triangle at different times, and if you started doing badly, they would switch the singing to a recording of that person singing badly, and maybe even worse. But then if you're doing a good job, they'll play the version where they're doing a good job, and then the judges like respond. You have Randy, Simon, and Paula kind of because we used to watch American Idol as a family. So I was like, anyway, but I played a bunch of games on PS2, Ratchet and Clank, stuff like that. Yeah, so that was the first type of video games I used to play. But then, in like middle school, super into RuneScape. I was into a lot of the and then World of Warcraft. I was kind of obsessed with those. MMORPGs, extremely different genre than the one I'm working on now. But yeah, those were sort of my early days with video games.
That's great to hear. Yeah, PS2 was a huge system for me. I got that near release, and I still have a fond memory of whatever football game was out there at launch. And launching it on, I don't know if it was Christmas Day, and hearing the announcers call out the fact that it's a Christmas game that I'm being played. And it's like, what? How did it? Oh, yeah, there's the system knows the time, and the devs use that. Wow. And having
Uh-huh.
my mind blown about that a little bit. And even today, you see devs do a lot of Christmas content, which is really neat, and to
Mhm.
see all that development over the years. Is there anything else people you'd like people to know about you or your work before we sign off here today?
Definitely wishlist the game if it sounds like fun to you. It'll be I've got pages up on Quest and Steam. Like I said, there'll be a flat version too, but I know your audience is into VR, which is the best way to play the game. And I mean, I think it'll be fun. Some features I haven't posted about yet are sort of the customization aspect of the game where you'll be able to pick your voice, decorate your sock with different goofy accessories, fabrics, stuff like that. I think there's a lot of fun stuff to come that I haven't shared quite yet. So definitely follow along. If it sounds like fun to you, I'm having fun making it. So hopefully other people will have fun playing it and following along.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time, Brandon. Definitely a really interesting project, and can't wait to see it evolve. So thank you for the time today.
Thanks so much. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.